going on, guys? This is Shannon from Talking Personality here, and today we'll be answering the question, WTF is Objective Personality? This is going to be quite a long one because I'm just going to cover everything about it. It's basically going to be some sort of primer on the Objective Personality model in a sense. So we'll get straight into it. I'll cover what OP is, how it differs from other personality theories or models. I'll also be running through the entire OP checklist to provide an understanding of what this is all about. So Objective Personality, or OP, came about from a YouTuber called Dave Superpowers around the start of 2018. The DSP channel started uploading new things after an extensive hiatus. The new content was about this Objective Personality model. It's an alternate take on the work of Jung, Myers-Briggs, that sort of thing. There are some pretty big differences between how OP does things and how the MBTI does things, so let's head down that path now. The MBTI is entirely subjective. You basically take a quiz and you get a result back. It doesn't matter what other people think about your results or your type, whatever you say goes. You can even get certified MBTI practitioners to put you down as a certain type, even if it's not actually the result you got when you took the type indicator itself. So again, the MBTI is entirely subjective. What other people think doesn't matter. You type yourself basically and call it a day. It's up to you how honest you are with yourself, I should say. Or maybe better, how well you know yourself. With OP, however, things are done in a completely different way. Your own thoughts on your type don't actually matter. What matters is what a number of other people type you as following a checklist. There's been some debate in the past about whether or not objective is the correct term. It's semantics, but the correct term might have been intersubjective because each person is going to be subjective in their judgments on each part of the checklist. So technically, objective doesn't fit. Okay, so now that we've covered how OP's approach to typing people differs from the entirely subjective MBTI approach, I want to touch on some other aspects that separate OP from other models. In the MBTI, there are 16 types that are labeled using the 4-letter dichotomy. So it's extroversion, introversion, sensing and intuition, thinking and feeling, and then perceiving and judging. This dichotomy doesn't exist in OP. Instead, types are referred to as their entire 512 type, which might look like something like MF, FENIBPSC in brackets. Don't worry if this all seems a little crazy. I'll cover what all that means soon. While OP does use the MBTI's 4-letter dichotomy for marketing, relatability, and just general purposes, the letters are not actually a part of a person's type. Another thing that separates OP from other models is their definitions. Some of the definitions OP uses will feel wrong to people that are used to the MBTI or Jungian definitions of some key terms. These terms organize and also sensation. People from a Jungian background will recognize organize as essentially summing up what thinking and feeling, the rational functions, do. In OP, however, organize is attributed to the introverted observer functions, which are introverted sensation and introverted intuition. The reasoning behind this is that organize here is intended to represent a process that is happening beyond our conscious awareness. It's about filtering out information that is coming in. So in this sense, it's referring to an organizing of information before we're consciously aware of it. This is why it's different to thinking or feeling, which are, from a Jungian perspective, the functions that actually organize information. Sensation is another term that differs from other models. In OP, sensing is facts, plain and simple. What your 5 senses pick up, that's it. This is consistent with Jung and also the MBTI, but where it differs is in the introversion of sensation. From a Jungian perspective, introverted sensation is about the subjective sense impressions we receive from external stimuli. In OP, however, introverted sensation is about organizing known sensory facts. At least that's how I understand it. This difference is drastic and it highlights how different OP is to Jung, which from my perspective means it should be viewed as its own thing and not really viewed as a direct extension or interpretation of Jung's work. OP's introverted sensation is along the same lines as the understanding the MBTI has. So those are a couple of differences in terminology between OP and other personality models. Now I'll get on to what makes up the OP model. The OP model, at its very core, is a checklist that is intended to be filled out by people without any collusion whatsoever, regarding the observations the typers are making of the people they're typing. The idea is that once the checklist is complete, you compare the checklist and the typing you got with the other person, see what you checked the same as, take note of the differences, develop and build upon your understandings of the model, and then do the same thing again and again and try to get more accurate results. Accuracy here is in relation to getting the same type as another person in a blind test situation. There isn't any authority on what is the correct type for anyone. Before I get into the checklist itself, one key feature of the entire OP model is the idea of saviors and demons. Saviors are aspects of ourselves we feel comfortable with, things we feel responsible for, things we can rely on, qualities we take for granted under the assumption that everyone else is equally as good as we are in these areas. Demons are aspects of ourselves that we don't feel comfortable with, the things we don't feel responsible for or don't want any part of, the parts of ourselves we do not rely on, but with a couple of twists. In OP, there's the concept of tidal waves. People from a Jungian or MBTI perspective might recognize this idea as being in the grip of an inferior function. It's a similar thing. Tidal waves are the things that keep coming back to haunt us, the things we repress or ignore or pass on to others. These issues can be tracked if you pay attention to who you're typing. They're the problems that people continuously have. It's a bit like a part of us that just never learns its lesson. Puts its hand on the stove, gets burnt, that puts its hand back on the stove a couple of months later. There is also this idea of peacocking. This is people that might want to be their demon functions, people that might want to have other people think they are incredibly good at their demons, that kind of thing. It's not advisable, in my opinion, to use peacocking to actually type people with, because to accuse someone of peacocking is to make an assumption about the other person, and this is not something you can rely on other people to make as well. I feel this part is more about the self-growth aspect of OP, and not really a great thing to use when it comes to typing people according to the checklist. A couple more things before getting to the checklist. The first is observers and deciders. Observer functions are sensing and intuition, and these are viewed as functions relating to the ways we deal with information. Decider functions are thinking and feeling, and these are viewed as functions relating to the ways we make decisions. The second is the human needs. These are taken from Tony Robbins and have been incorporated here to develop understandings of the functions in each attitude, introverted and extroverted. So the human needs are organize, this is the introverted observer functions, intuition and sensing. Gather, this is the extroverted observer functions, also intuition and sensing. Identity, this is the introverted decider functions, which is thinking and feeling. And then there's tribe, this is the extroverted decider functions, also thinking and feeling. These will be covered a little more in a bit. Now we're on to the checklist. The first coin is determining whether a person is a single observer or a single decider. Single observers have issues with control and chaos, but are pretty balanced when it comes to their identity and the tribe. Single deciders are the other way around. They have issues with their identity and the tribe, but are pretty balanced when it comes to control and chaos. The next coin is looking at what type of decider the person is. Are they an identity decider? This is an introverted decider. Or are they a tribe decider or an extroverted decider? Identity refers to people that place their own personal values, reasons, and opinions above those of others. They refer to themselves and what they themselves think or feel, etc., before seeing what the general consensus about these things might be. Tribe refers to people that place the values, reasons, and opinions of others above their own. They refer to the wider collective and seek out what other people are thinking and feeling, and this influences what they themselves will think or feel. The next coin is looking at what type of observer the person is. Are they an organized observer? This is the introverted observers. Or are they a gather observer, which is the extroverted observers? Organized refers to people that find answers by going over known information they already know. This relates to that understanding of it as filtering out new information. Organized won't branch out and look for new information if it doesn't have to. It starts with information already known to the person and then seeks to find new information if it needs to. This can be understood as depth over breadth when it comes to information. Gather refers to people that find answers by actively seeking new information and letting the organized processing of information take place only after they've gathered as much new information as they think they'll need to get the answers that they're after. This can be understood as breadth over depth when it comes to new information. The next coin is thinking versus feeling. Thinking seeks to figure things out and make sense of things before prioritizing it or evaluating its worth. What this means is thinking has a focus on reasoning and understanding, and this comes at the expense of consideration regarding what the actual worth of whatever this is to themselves or others. This means that thinkers can spend a lot of time figuring something out or making sense of something that's not very important to themselves or other people, and therefore has pretty much been a waste of time. That's where thinking is in OP's model. Reasons and understanding above prioritization and evaluation of worth to self and or others. Feeling seeks to prioritize and evaluate things before figuring them out or understanding the reasoning behind it. What this means is feeling can prioritize or evaluate something without actually looking into whether or not it makes sense to do this. I find this relates very well to the Jungian understanding of feeling, which is basically just likes and dislikes. That's basically what feeling is in OP as well. The next coin is looking at the combinations of letters in a way that uses stereotypes to try and capture the vibe of someone. This coin and the next one are really used as a tool to double check how your typing progress is going, or also to help provide a little guidance when it comes to the other coins. So the first one's SF versus NT. This is sensing, feeling versus intuitive thinkers. SF is labeled as popularity, as SF has a focus on seeing the value of things in the real, tangible world, looking to understand the reasoning behind this on a more general level at a later stage. And NT is labeled as nerdy. Its focus is on understanding general or abstract reasoning behind things first, and then looking to see its value in the real world at a later stage. ST versus NF. This is sensing, thinkers versus intuitive, feelers. ST is labeled as reporter, as ST has a focus on understanding the reasoning behind things in the real world, determining the value of it on a general level afterwards. And NF is labeled as hippie, as its focus is on the value of things on a general or abstract level, figuring out the reasoning behind this afterwards. At this point, I'd like to try and clear up some of the vagueness surrounding the word abstract here. I saw discussions on this a while back. People didn't really get what it meant. I've used the word general above to help express what this means, but I'll elaborate a little anyway. The abstract world isn't some mystical or magical place. It's the world of generalities. It's just in general. It's looking at things on a wider level. The simple imagery of zooming out is perfect for understanding what the abstract world is. So the real world here, the one that sensing is referring to, is the specifics. It's referring to specific information, specific sensory facts, information that's perceived through your five senses. This is the equivalent of zooming in. It's the specific and literal details. Okay, so the next two coins are in relation to the decider functions, this time in the extroverted and introverted attitudes, but they're put against each other as opposites. So it's thinking versus feeling and introversion versus extroversion at the same time. The first one here is FI versus TE, introverted feeling versus extroverted thinking. FI places a priority on their own personal values before seeking out the reasoning or understandings of the tribal community. TE places a priority on the understandings of the tribe and community before seeking out their own personal values. To clarify what this means, FI is determining how much value something is worth, whatever it is. It can be a person, a thought, or a thing, literally anything, and is placing an emphasis on its own evaluation of this thing's worth, what it means to themselves, and this evaluation process is happening before consideration of what other people think about it, before looking to understand the reasons why people are thinking what they do. TE is the opposite. It's seeking out the reasoning and understandings about things first. It wants to see what everyone's thinking about something, what's making sense to the outer world, and after seeing this, it'll decide how to prioritize this information. It decides what these things mean to itself personally after having a look at what other people are thinking about it. The next one is TI versus FE, introverted thinking versus extroverted feeling. TI places a priority on the individual's own thoughts and reasoning before seeking out how the tribal community are prioritizing it. FE places a priority on what and how others are prioritizing something, and only after this does it look to understand it on a personal level. To clarify all of the functions and attitudes in accordance with my understandings, it would look a little like this. FI is my own personal evaluations of things, how much I like or dislike something. TI is my own personal reasoning and understandings, what makes sense to me. FE is the collective evaluation of others, how much others, the wider community in general, likes or dislikes something. And TE, the collective reasoning and understandings of others, what makes sense to everyone else. After the decider functions in attitudes coin, we get to the observer functions in attitudes. And this is done in the same way as the deciders were, so we get the total opposites. It's SI versus NE and NI versus SE. Something to keep in mind here is that the observer functions are about how we deal and process information, how we deal with and process information, I should say. So all observer talk is information based. It's not about making decisions. It's really important to try and remove any decision-making process from the observer functions because all they do is observe. There's no judgment, no decision-making at all. Another thing to note is that intuition in OP is about seeing patterns, connecting the dots, so to speak. It's about knowing something without knowing how you know. It connects seemingly irrelevant information together to observe how different things are connected to each other. With that in mind, the first one is SI versus NE. SI versus NE. SI, introverted sensing, observes known or old sensory information initially and then it gathers new concepts and sees patterns in this information afterwards. What this means is introverted sensing from an OP standpoint is about real life facts that we already know, and these real world facts are considered before branching out into the world of possibilities and exploring where these known facts might lead. NE, extroverted intuition, gathers new concepts and patterns before going over known sensory facts. What this means is that NE immediately starts to intuitively explore what possibilities and patterns might be emerging from new information that it's receiving before it looks inwards at sensory facts that have already been organized or filtered, before it looks at what it already knows. To add a little bit here, NE is looking outwards, not inwards initially. NE sees possibilities and patterns instantly, and that's where its focus is. It's seeing this before it observes its own known facts. The second one here is NI versus NE. SE. NI versus SE. NI, introverted intuition, observes known or old concepts or patterns before gathering new sensory facts. What this means is that introverted intuition in OP observes connections, concepts, and patterns it has already observed when coming across new information before it looks to gather new sensory facts to add. SE, extroverted sensing, gathers new information in the form of literal sensory facts, i.e. what it can actually see, smell, hear, etc., and then observes how this information fits into its old patterns and connections. This means SE will actively look to seek out new sensory information before seeing whether the information is related to something that they've already observed and associated with other things in the past. And now we're up to the animals. The animals are combinations of functions in attitudes, always a decider and an observer, but all combinations of introversion and extroversion are included here. The animals are sleep, which is a combination of an introverted decider and an introverted observer. Play, which is a combination of an extroverted decider and an extroverted observer. Consume, which is a combination of an introverted decider and an extroverted observer. And blast, which is a combination of an introverted observer and an extroverted decider. Sleep and play oppose each other. Sleep is entirely introverted and play is entirely extroverted, and these two animals are viewed as energy animals as they relate to how we conserve and spend our energy. Consume and blast oppose each other. The introversion and extroversion of each function is opposite to the other, and these two animals are viewed as information animals as they relate to how we respect and view information in general. I'd like to note here that the animals are how OP incorporates introversion and extroversion just in general into its model. There isn't any introversion or extroversion dichotomy or coin in this system. The first coin in this section is sleep versus play. Sleep is about processing and retaining information for yourself before spending this energy on others. A simple example of sleep would be to require a few days' notice before you have to do anything that will require a lot of energy and then needing a couple of days away from everyone else to recover. Play is about spending your energy on others before processing and conserving your own energy. Simple example of play would be to be bending over backwards for everyone else most of the time, and then basically just burning yourself out because you haven't been looking after your own energy levels. Instead, you've been spending all of your energy on everyone else. So the sleep versus play coin is looking at how someone manages their own fuel gauge, essentially. Do they need to fill up the gas before doing anything, or are they always running on empty? In reality, it's not quite so cut and dry, but the sleep versus play coin is looking at which side of this energy consumption coin a person falls. The next coin here is consume versus blast. Consume is about gathering information for yourself before looking to share it with others. Consume highly respects information. Consume respects information so much that it can have trouble ever sharing information with others because it constantly feels like it needs more information before it feels confident enough to just share anything. Blast is about sharing and teaching information with others before gathering information and learning it for yourself. It's looking to get started on sharing what it's learned and teaching information before it actually has any real information to teach or share. Blast loves sharing information so much that it doesn't take the time to gather new information because it's always busy sharing what it already knows. Both Consume and Blast love information, but they're coming from opposite ends of the spectrum. Consume loves learning and taking in new information. Blast loves sharing and teaching the information. Like the sleep versus play coin, and all of the coins really, a person might not fall on any extreme end of the Consume and Blast spectrum. What you're looking to identify is which side do they lean more towards. So now we're on to the combinations of animals coin. The animals themselves are combinations of functions in attitude, but there's another layer added to the checklist here, which is the combinations of animals. The first coin here is SC versus PB. This is sleep and consume versus play and blast. SC is a deep inner world of taking in and processing information for oneself, and PB is looking to spend a whole lot of energy sharing information with others. The second coin here is CP versus BS. Consume and play versus blast and sleep. CP is gathering in a lot of information and then looking to do something with it, and BS is going over known information, reworking it, and then sharing that information. Something to add here, SC, sleep and consume, is the most introverted combination in the entire OP model, as it's made up of sleep, which is both an introverted decider and an introverted observer function, and consume, which has an introverted decider function. The decider functions are quite socially oriented. They're generally relating to people in some sense, be it their thoughts or values, etc. So this is why the sleep-consume combination is so stereotypically introverted. PB is the most extroverted combination in the entire OP model, as it's made up of play, which is both an extroverted decider and an extroverted observer, and blast, which has an extroverted decider function in it. The next coin is the second to last one, and it's referred to as the sexual orientation of the extroverted decider function, as masculine and feminine. The coin is looking exclusively at the extroverted decider function and nothing else. This means it's looking at how a person interacts with other people. A feminine extroverted decider function is when someone is movable and fluid when it comes to the tribe, the community, or others in general, and this is offset by that person being quite direct and immovable when it comes to their own identity or their own introverted decider function. A masculine extroverted decider function is when someone is direct or pushy when it comes to the tribe or others in general, but more fluid and movable when it comes to their own identity, their own introverted decider function. This coin is not recommended for people to get stuck on when learning the system. It's better to focus your effort on other more obvious or easy coins. The last coin is the sexual orientation of the sensory function. And again, it's masculine versus feminine. Masculine sensory is being solid and stubborn when it comes to facts, sensory real world facts, but being fluid and movable when it comes to concepts and patterns, that sort of thing. Feminine sensory is about being fluid and movable with facts, but being solid and stubborn when it comes to concepts and patterns. With both of these sexual orientation coins, something to remember is that they do not take into account whether what you're looking at is a savior or a demon. The position of the extroverted decider function or the sensation function does not actually matter. With the sensory one, it's also not considering whether the sensing is introverted or extroverted. So hopefully that helps out. That's a rundown on what objective personality is, and then I've just gone through the entire checklist so that you can hopefully understand it a little more, understand it just in the first place, and start using it. Try and get someone else to get into it, see if you can both match each other on the checklist when it comes to typing others, see if you can get more accurate with each other, that sort of thing, and go from there. I'd like to add here that I do paid typings. Send me an email at talkingpersonality@outlook.com. I generally prefer to do them from a Jungian perspective, that sort of thing. I'm not an MBTI certified practitioner or anything. So yeah, hope to hear from you soon. I'll see you later.